executives. Your concepts and opinion will be very valuable. So thank you so much. Okay, are you ready? We start with the interview?
Sure.
Okay. So first question, how is the Chief Information Security Office referred to today?
So how do you, meaning what's the scope of the Information Security Office and what their challenges are?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the scope today, by and large, has historically been what I'll say traditional IT, supporting the internal PCs and network and systems and data. I think where it's evolved to and where it needs to further evolve to is the growing scope and the breadth of information technology that an organization has at its disposal. So by that I mean it goes well beyond traditional IT, and it goes into marketing, it goes into sales, it goes into the product side, the manufacturing side, because information systems and information technology is being used in all parts of the business, and most organizations are now becoming technology companies. They have an app, they have a website, they're embedding technology into products and services. And so the traditional, what I'd say, internal focus of information security now has a much bigger and broader focus because the technology permeates all aspects of business.
Oh, I see. So what are the most relevant characteristics of the CISO profile in today's organization in the face of digital transformation? As I wrote to you, this magazine, the principal theme is going to be digital transformation. So that's why this interview is going to be around that theme. Okay?
So for me, the skills and the capabilities that a CISO needs to bring to this, and I can send you a picture of this, because I wrote it in my second book around the skills for a 21st century CISO. The CISO needs to be what I'll call Z-shaped. There was a concept from a design company, IDEO, in the 70s and 80s that talked about T-shaped individuals. And the top of the T was kind of the breadth of business acumen, and the base of the T was the depth of technical acumen. Now, that, I think, is an interesting reference, but I think, from my view, a CISO needs to be what I'll call Z-shaped. The top of the Z, they need to have the breadth of business acumen, because, again, it's about understanding the business, the risks, the digital transformations that the business wants to do. The base of the Z is the technical breadth, because technology is now well beyond just your PC, server, a network, and apps. You've got blockchains, you've got artificial intelligence, you have technology that's permeating in so many different ways. And the hash that creates the Z is the risk, security, controls, compliance acumen.
Okay.
Right. So you need the business breadth, the technical breadth, the risk and security acumen, and then, to be honest, what needs to wrap all around that is a level of ethical and moral responsibility with integrity, accountability, because right now we've already kind of crossed the threshold where information technology is becoming inextricably linked with social well-being.
I see.
And so the CISO needs to also bring that ethics aspect to it.
Okay. So I will wait for the document you told me you're going
I will send you that.
Okay, thank you so much. So how is, could you please put on your camera?
Oh, yeah. Let me...
Because we are making a video, and this interview is going to be on our virtual magazine.
Yeah, let me do that here real quick. See if that works.
Okay, so hi again.
Hi.
Okay, Malcolm, how is he located in the organizational chart today? I'm talking about the Chief Information Security Officer, of course.
Yeah, the Chief Information Security Officer today predominantly reports into the CIO in most organizations. Now, personally, I don't know that that's necessarily the right spot for it, given what we've just discussed in the breadth and the depth of the business risks and the reach that the CISO needs to have in order to manage and mitigate those risks and span the entirety of the business.
So how the profile evolved? What is the most relevant changes? Its competencies are changed?
Yeah, I think the relevant changes over the past several years are, again, what I was talking about in terms of the business acumen needing to grow, right, versus just being a security technologist. You certainly have to have the technical competencies, but you have to have the business competencies to understand the business processes, the business and digital transformations that are occurring. And there's a growing, what I'll say, set of legal competencies to understand and interact with the legal team, the compliance obligations, and help them translate the interpretation of law into concrete operational actions that can be taken from a control perspective.
How is he recognized in this new environment?
In the new environment,
what are the managers with whom you should interact directly within the organization? And how should your relationship with them be?
So I think the relationship with the managers needs to span very broadly. There should be having routine conversations with the business unit leaders. They should be having routine conversations with the CFO, routine conversations with the general counsel. If you're in a manufacturing organization, routine conversations with factory managers and factory leadership. So for me, it would be like having the role that, again, a CFO has, right? Because they span the entirety of the business. They certainly have their financial acumen, but they have to have the business acumen to translate, the accounting, the finance, the profit loss into actions for the business. I think the CISO needs to evolve to something similar because they need to become the Chief Information Risk Officer and evolve to, like my role is Chief Security and Trust Officer. Because right now, people are lacking in trust in technology. They're lacking in the ability to trust that the companies that are processing their personal information or they're doing digital experiences with are adequately protecting them. And so for me, it's got to evolve to a broader role of security, risk, trust. Because, again, the technology is permeating every aspect of the business. And so you have to think about it exceptionally broad. And at the same time, while you're working at that kind of, what I'll say, C-suite and the executives to understand where they're going, they also need to be grounded enough that they're interacting with employees that are in those organizations. Because the employees that are actually executing a business process, that are making the tactical decisions around what to do and how to do it, those are the employees where they're going to get the most, what I say, grassroots reach in order to affect change.
And all those things are already working in all companies, in all organizations. What do you think about that? I don't know if you could tell me about, of course, United States, but do you know other environments around that?
Yeah, so I spend a decent amount of time traveling internationally in Europe pretty routinely, heading actually to Australia on Friday and through the Asia-Pacific region. So I think broadly speaking, even in the U.S., there's almost a bifurcation of the Chief Information Security Officer. Some are anchored in that traditional aspect. They report just into IT. Everything goes through the CIO, and they have a voice because the board wants to see them periodically for an update. But by and large, they're not the business driver and they're not having the ability to go interact independently of the CIO to go affect change. There's a large chunk of the world that's still stuck in that spot. There are elements, and I see it in the U.S., I see it abroad, where the CISO, even if they report to IT, has been given a level of independence and objectivity to span outside of the CIO and to go engage more broadly to identify and tackle risks. They have a voice at the equivalent of the Board of Directors Audit Committee. They have a voice and they sit on a corporate compliance committee or a corporate ethics committee. There's, my opinion, given my interaction, there's probably only 15 to 20% of the CISOs that are in that, I'd say, broader role. The rest of them are anchored and in essence, subjugated under the CIO without having that independence or objectivity to go drive a bigger level of change.
And how about South America? How it is going on over here? Do you know anything about that?
I haven't spent as much time in South America. My
Which
interactions...
country?
Pardon?
Which country?
I will interact occasionally with peers in Brazil, Venezuela, Chile, Colombia a little bit, but by and large, just a handful of interactions annually, usually in phone calls with peers. But I think again the distribution is, from my experience though, it's more limited than I have in Europe, Asia Pacific, or in the U.S. But I think it's similar. I think by and large the CISO is stuck under the CIO and doesn't have the reach outside of the IT organization. Now, I think that's also starting to change, but I think it's still predominantly stuck like the rest of the world is. But again, I see elements of that changing certainly the past few years, and I think it will continue to evolve and change more.
And is the same here in Colombia? That situation is the same?
I would expect it to be, yeah, I would expect it to be very similar in Colombia as well.
Okay. So how is he recognized? Today it's easy, lost among so many acronyms. In each date, it is more difficult to know which are the functions that each one of these roles performs. CISO, CSO. How do they interact between them and other C-suite?
You know, in terms of what you were just talking about, because you might have a CISO, a Chief Information Security Officer, you might have a Chief Security Officer that's focused on physical security and fraud and items like that. You might also have a Chief Privacy Officer, right? And then a company might also have a Chief Risk Officer. So when you think of all of those independent yet interdependent roles, in my view, that becomes what I'll call a corporate governance issue. How do you, because I look at them like a Venn diagram. You've got physical risk, you got logical risk, you got privacy, you got legal and compliance risk, and in the center mask, it's all about risk. And so what you need to do is have each one of those, what I'll say, lenses for that Venn diagram be looked at independently, but it needs to be blended with the other items so that you can actually focus on what I'll call the threaded risk, because there's risks that cut across each of those, and unless those various, what I'll say, C-suite risk officers all work together and have a functional responsibility that binds them, you're going to end up either over-controlling for risk or you're going to under-control for risk because they're not coordinated. Now, in my prior roles at Intel and in my role at Cylance, I'm responsible for integrating those things and looking at that holistic picture. And my view is the CISO, if they have demonstrated the right business acumen, the right risk acumen, the right technical acumen, will ascend to that what I'll call Chief Security and Trust Officer role and oversee all of those elements.
That means that CISO right to a strategic decision making place in organizations, right?
Yes, it does.
And how he does that every activity? I mean, how is everything about the strategic decision around the CISO, or the CISO better, the CISO around the strategic decisions in the company?
Yeah. Well, I think some of that is temporal, right? Different companies are at different spots in their maturation, in their use of technology, and in their digital transformations. And if the CISO has what I'll call a strategic planning acumen and can see the business evolution, they can then chart the path for their own role evolution in what I'll call a just-in-time fashion. They'll paint the vision of where the business is going. They'll paint the vision of where the risk is going. They'll paint the vision of how they should control and architect to manage the risk, but then they will also bring together that Venn diagram and recognize the other, what I'll say, fellow travelers that manage risk in the company. And if they do that, they will then demonstrate the leadership capabilities to enable that transformation for themselves and for their company and for the role.
And those risks you're talking are growing around the organization. I mean, how are them right now? I mean, they mean a very special attention, of course, of the companies, and especially very special attention in the activities, in the CISO's activities, right?
Yep. And the risks are growing, and that's predominantly because of vulnerabilities in technology and the continued proliferation of technology across the business. Right? Now, again, when you think about it from a traditional sense, people, just even predominantly in the world today, still consider things like ransomware, right? And the things that happened, this time last year. They think about breach of personal information and the disclosures they might have to do on that and how it might affect the trust in the business. But I also think that people are failing to look at other risk dynamics. Again, if I'm a manufacturing company, and let's just say I'm using chemicals and gas, things that could be hazardous in my manufacturing process, and those chemicals are controlled by a system, if I was a bad guy, I could shut off perhaps your factory and ransom you, right, if the systems are vulnerable. Now, that has an immediate revenue effect, right? The other thing that I could do is play with the systems, and if they're vulnerable enough, let's say release chemicals faster than they're intended and create a potential hazardous situation to people's lives in the factory or the surrounding community. So that's a different aspect of the risk, one that I think a lot of manufacturers don't necessarily recognize because they're focused on their revenue risk, right? Not the other risk elements of how those systems could be misused. Or an example of, again, transformation of a business and transformation of risk. A couple of years ago, and I'm looking for it, I don't have it handy, there was a gentleman in the Midwest of the United States that had degenerative eye disease. There was a technology that was approved in 2015 by the Food and Drug Administration of the U.S. for an experimental eye surgery. Think of sunglasses with a video processing unit, graphics processing unit, and it was basically plugged in to this gentleman's brain with the hope and the thought that his brain would start translating the signals and he might be able to regain some of his sight. Now, 90 days after he had the surgery, this gentleman saw images of his wife's face for the first time in like 13 or 14 years. And so you look at it and you go, okay, that's amazing. We're using technology now to give people some level of vision back after loss of eyesight. Now, that's amazing from a technology perspective. Now, what are the risk issues with that? Well, what if a QR code was in front of it and it flipped bits the wrong way, and now it could hold that person or somebody else in the future hostage to pay in Bitcoin to get their eyesight back? Right? If that technology is poorly designed, developed, and implemented, and it has the ability, if that compute device has the ability to execute malicious code, that's possible. And so this is where I start going, we've got a permeation of technology that is now creating potential life and death scenarios. We've seen with Jeep a couple years ago, right, their car get hacked, and somebody showed how they could remotely, change the braking of the car. So we have to think really, really broadly about these risks, the potential likelihoods, and go beyond just looking at what my fiduciary accountability is and think about what my social responsibility is when I proliferate technology and how I need to manage it to minimize the risks.
That means that business and technology, they have to go together. I mean, CISO has to think about everything, taking care in all directions. I mean, that's why you were telling me how is going on right now, that environment, right?
Yes.
Okay. So how does he generate, the CISO, growth from a strategic rather than technical point of view?
Yeah, in terms of developing from a technical point of view that strategy, you can do it from two levels. You can start at the technical level and say, hey, Bitcoin's coming along. I'm a retailer. We're going to use Bitcoin for or the concepts behind Bitcoin for transaction authentication and attestation, right? Or we're going to use Bitcoin as a part of payment processing. So you can look at it at that level, and you need to from the technical evolution of things. Or you can look at it and say, again, from a business perspective, where's the business need to head for growth? And then from there, figure out what technology needs to be applied to enable that, and then how you need to enable that technology while managing the risks to enable it.
You already mentioned that some of the challenges of the CISO, but what CISO challenges in the context of digital transformation? What are the challenges?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges, to be honest, is just keeping up with the fast pace of technical changes. That's a constant challenge. And so the CISO and their team have to constantly have their radar on and be at the edge of the evolution of technology. I have this concept that in order to shape risk, you've got to run the risk to shape risk. And so the CISO and their team almost needs to be the earliest adopters of the new technology in order to understand it, and then in order to guide the business in how to deploy and use it in a manner that manages the risks. Because if the CISO and the risk team is one that says, no, that's risky, then what happens? The business will go around you, in which case they're going to get the technology anyways. They're going to start using it, and they're likely going to use it in unsafe ways. And so I look at it and I go, the CISO has to have a forward-leaning view to run to risky things and shape the path of the risk rather than shy away and try and keep the business away from things they perceive as risky. Hopefully that makes sense.
That also means that CISO and CISO's team have to be very awake. I mean, they have to have a big imagination to grow first than the risk, right?
They have to be very imaginative, they have to be very innovative, and they also have to be risk takers as well as risk managers. And that's an interesting thing to say, I'm supposed to manage and limit risk, but me personally and my organization has to be a risk taker to do that.
Okay. So in the framework of SMAC technologies, I mean, do you hear me? Let me see. Okay. I repeat. In the framework of technologies like social business, mobility, analytics, and cloud, how CISOs define its value promise?
I think the value promise, and for me, I discovered this years ago back in my Intel days, and it gets to this view of sometimes, again, running to the risky things. But the CISO's job, and I think the job of the information security team, is not protection for protection's sake. The typical mission of the security team is safeguarding information assets, blah, 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 type of statement. And I think that's good and that's necessary, but it's not sufficient. I simplified for my team at Intel my focus today and everything to 3 simple words. My job is to protect to enable. I've got to protect to enable people, data, and the business. That's the value proposition, is one of protecting to enable the business, not just protection for protection's sake.
And which one of those technologies you think is going to be most important in the next days, next months, in the future, in the immediately future?
Well, to be honest, they're all important, and I think they're all interlinked. Mobility has driven social computing. Why? Because I can take a picture with this, I can instantly share it, I can update myself, it can track me. And so I think there's an interdependency between those technologies that is fueling their growth. Now, I think when you talk about what I'd say strategically important technologies that I think will have fundamental change for not only the CISO, the business, but also society, you've got things like artificial intelligence, right? You've got things like quantum computing on the horizon, which will dramatically change scale and capability for how much compute capacity we have. All of those things will be transformational for all aspects of our life. If I'm in a health sciences company, and I can do quantum computing with artificial intelligence, think of the medical breakthroughs I could now do, because my capacity to analyze options has just grown exponentially. Right? So I think, again, at a more fundamental level, there's things that go well beyond social and mobility, into other things. And I think the other aspect of the Internet of Things, right, it has a tremendous amount of risk associated with it because of the way in which companies are just slopping technology into things without truly understanding the potential risks and actively trying to mitigate the risk. But it also has tremendous potential for benefit because, again, an IoT-based roadway with sensors in cars and knowing the occupants of cars and all that, think of the efficiency of transportation flow. And with those sensors and that capability and potentially autonomous vehicles, the reduction in traffic collisions that could occur. I mean, so you have amazing opportunity for significant economic and social benefit. At the same time, again, if these things are done wrong, substantial potential for great societal harm.
which kind of business is going to have most impact by the digital transformation between the CISO's functions and everything, which kind of business they are going to work more than the other ones?
You know, it's a great question. I think I spend enough time with peers in a variety of different industries. And you've got cement companies, so a true mortar company. There's several of them that are now becoming technology companies. Why? Because they're putting sensors in the cement. And they're using those sensors to figure out when roads might need maintenance or deteriorate, and selling big data and analytics back to municipalities. So you've got massive transformation even in a mortar company that's happening. You've got other organizations that are transforming because of it. Construction companies, home builders. Well, what are they doing? Well, they're building smart homes. So they're doing additional value-added services into the home for the consumer, improving their margin, improving their revenue stream. Right? You've got, in the healthcare area, you've got massive transformation there happening because of the digitization of health records and the ability for, robotic surgeries, right? So you've got, companies that over the past few years have started using automation to assist a surgeon. And better recovery times, lower operating risks, and so, again, I don't think there's an area that won't be touched by it. Education, online education for free, right? You've got even some big U.S., Ivy League colleges that are putting courses online and, in essence, giving them away. That will massively transform how you get educated. My kids, two of them are still in college. When they struggle with course and they didn't understand stuff, what do? They go find something on YouTube, and they watch somebody who explains a concept from a different angle in a different way to solidify their understanding.
What about the entertainment specifically?
Entertainment, I think, yeah. I mean, you certainly see it with the streaming videos. You see it with interactive capability. I think you're going to see it more and more with virtual reality, right? Imagine a film with VR.
Yeah.
I mean, you're isolated. You're now brought into the world instead of watching it on a screen. With surround sound, and you felt like
inside.
That was transformational. So you go back to when my parents were kids, right? It was black and white. You were in a movie theater, and it was cool. Think of Gone with the Wind when it first came out and stuff like that. You think of today, one of the big box movies, Wonder Woman recently, or the Black Panther that just got released in the U.S. Again, the experience is way different. But imagine now I've got full immersion with the virtual reality. And I'm in a chair that puts me like I'm in the back seat of a fighter jet, right? And I feel the rumbling, and I'm immersed in it, right? That could massively change the entertainment experience. But you've digitized all aspects of it, and the sensory inputs that you have could be quite significant.
Yeah, I heard that in Korea, at the theaters, the walls are like a real walls. I mean, if you touch everything has life. I mean, you can interact with that kind of walls and everything. So that's right. Everything changed, and it's changing more and more every day.
Yeah, and even from going to grocery, right, and going shopping for food. Amazon bought Whole Foods. I just saw on the news today they're expanding their home delivery stuff into San Francisco and a couple other cities. Now I can just when I create my list of the things I need milk, I need this, I need that, and then you go, I'm busy. Buy, deliver, right? I don't have to go to the grocery store anymore. Or maybe when I'm in the grocery store, the grocery will have a mobile app that knows where I'm at, and I've created my list, and it creates the directory of what's on what's aisle, and then maybe the soup company or the whatever the good is pops up a coupon, right? And so now I can go, $2 off special on aisle 3 for this, right? Because my social profile, my inventory of what I've bought is all digitized, and it now knows that even though I didn't put on my list that I needed coconut milk, it recognizes that my cupboard doesn't have it. Right? So I think there could be, that would be transformational. It would also allow you, to do different things. There's some apps now where, you can find a recipe that you want to cook. And then that recipe also has the grocery list. Now imagine you've got the recipe, you've got the grocery list, now you're in the store, and the store recognizes what's on that grocery list, and it basically enables you to find it, and then makes recommendations for, hey, you're making beef stroganoff, but what would go good with that is these 3 desserts and these 2 bottles of wine. Right? So you've just enabled me to have a better dining experience, and you've upsold while the person's in the store.
So how about certifications? It is mandatory or optional that a current CISO must have a certification to be as successful in this role?
It's an interesting question. I think certifications are useful because they demonstrate some level of understanding and some ability to take a test, right, and demonstrate some level of academic knowledge. I don't necessarily believe that certifications have to be necessary, and part of that is because I think, again, things change too much. Academic settings are academic, but real-life application of those things is sometimes quite different. And so it would be like saying to become a doctor, right? You have to go through the schooling, you have to get accredited, but guess what? You also have to pass through the hands-on training as a part of that. That hands-on application of the knowledge, I think, is the most critical component. So if there was to be some mandatory certifications, I think it would have to include some level of demonstrated time in a job where you're assessed. Experience, yeah. And that becomes the hard part. I think they're good because, again, they show a baseline of knowledge, but it would be hard to mandate it. Like, so after the Equifax breach in the U.S., there was a number of things in the press negatively calling out the fact that the CISO didn't have a technical degree, and therefore said they weren't confident enough to have done the job. Now, I look at that and I go, that's a short-sighted view, because if all it took was a technologist to manage risk better, think of all the technology that's out there that were created by technologists with vulnerabilities. And most CISOs and most CIOs are technologists, yet we have unmanaged and unmitigated risk by and large. So being a technologist in and of itself does not mean you're going to do a better job of understanding risk or managing risk. that's the thing I worry about with certifications. It could cause people to be short-sighted and not recognize that it is just having a certification is not necessarily sufficient demonstration of skills, leadership, because it goes well beyond that. If I'm academically smart but I can't communicate to people, what good does it do, right?
Big problem, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So today we talk about CDO, Chief Digital Officer. So how CISO interact with this role?
You know, it's an interesting thing that CDO role is certainly becoming up more and more and more to lead and drive, again, digital transformations in a business. I look at it and I go, why do you have a CDO if you have a CIO and you have a CTO, right? You go, for me, I don't understand if a business needs a chief digital officer. To me, it tells me that the CIO hasn't evolved and done their job. And so for me, when I look at it that way, I think that the CISO's interaction with the CDO should by and large be similar to what they would have with the chief technology officer or a chief information officer. You're trying to evolve the use of technology in the company, and my job is to help you evolve it, but doing it in a way that provides the adequate controls to manage the potential risks.
So how about the academy? How is the academy working on those many things that the CISO has to take care about it?
How's the
academy? The universities. Yeah.
The universities, yeah. You know, I think it's interesting. I think if you look back again a few years ago, worldwide there was only probably a few dozen programs that focused on information security as a focus. Other than that, it was under the computer science, and you could take a couple of courses. I think what you've started seeing over the past 5-7 years, and I think growingly you'll see more of this, you'll see information security and information assurance degree programs as a track under the computer science or you know, the software engineering side of things. I think you're seeing in the law schools a track for digital risk with chief privacy officers and other elements from a legal perspective. And I've also started seeing, particularly in the U.S., some universities under their business school have a growing focus on technology as well as the risk aspects of it. And if you look at, I was having a discussion yesterday with MIT. MIT has under the Sloan School of Business a cybersecurity for critical infrastructure focus. And they've got a whole kind of center focused on that.
And so I think
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think in the academic area, it's going to hit in a few different areas. What's in the computer science? What's in the law school? What's in the business school?
Have you heard about South America? Around the theme we're talking, I mean, the academy, the universities, how working in South America?
I haven't so much, other than Jaime and I having the exchanges to know as he moved into the academic side of it, you know, what he was trying to do to transform the academic experience to basically grow the acumen, and in kind of the either to augment the professional experience and give the academic breadth and depth, or as I'm still in college, getting the breadth and depth of skills necessary for me when I exit to move into a security role and then move through the ranks into the CISO role.
Okay. So we almost finished. I have two more questions.
Yes.
based on your experience, it is true that today a CISO earns or will earn a salary between 25 and 35% more? How and why is it determined? I'm sorry, my English is not as well.
Oh, no worries, no worries.
I hope you understand everything.
Yes. Yeah, no, I do. I think the CISO security jobs right now are carrying a premium to them, as you pointed out, and that's predominantly because companies are waking up and going, "Wow, I need a senior executive that understands security." And there's very few of us that have the breadth and depth of experience. So that, when supply is short and demand is high, price rises, right? But that's also true for the security practitioner who's actually evaluating the risk, who's the security technologist and security engineer. The price of the price and the salary for those are starting to carry a premium, predominantly because you have more demand than you have supply. Now, still though, when you look at it across organizations, there's a wide variety of the pay scales. I know I spend a lot of time with peers. And my anchor point for salaries is more U.S. based, but I would imagine similar things in South America and in other countries and continents. But if you look at the Fortune 500, you'll have salary ranges and compensation ranges for CISOs that can go from $2 million a year to $200,000 a year, and it all depends upon the organization, what they're willing to pay, how big the organization is, and whether or not they value that role. But again, some of it is size based. If I'm in a 200,000 person company and my security team is 1,500 people, and the business is making, $60 billion a year in revenue, you can afford a compensation that's seven figures. But if I'm in a food and beverage, I'm in a restaurant chain that has 600 or 700 restaurants, maybe has a few thousand people, and my security team is only like 20 people, they may only be spending, $150,000 to $200,000 a year.
I see. So, how do you see CISO in next 10 years? Cybersecurity and cyber defense topics could be the new normal for information security executives?
I do see over the next 5 to 10 years, this is where I hope that the CISOs will emerge into that broader business leadership role with the business acumen and evolve their role into a chief security and trust officer, where they're looking at the ethics of the technology. They're looking at privacy. They're looking at traditional information security risk. They're also looking at the physical elements of the risk that can get manifested. And that Venn diagram of all those risks, and I can send you a picture of that Venn diagram, that they put their reach around all of it and manage the interdependencies of those risks.
Okay, Malcolm, thank you so much. Later on, I'm going to send you by your email some questions, personal questions, because I would like to write a profile to publish in the magazine, in the Physic magazine, right? In the Impress magazine, because this interview is going to be just on the web, right? So I really appreciate very much you said yes to this interview. Have a good day and hope to hear you again. And next days I'm going to send you the question, okay?
Okay, and I will send you those couple pictures, the one of the skills for the CISO and the Venn diagram.
Yeah, of course. I will wait for them, and also about the book you told me.
I will
Information.
send you the link to my book. It's electronically available for free for download. So I'll send you the link on where you can download that as well.
Perfect, perfect. So thank you so much, and I hope to see you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Hope to see you soon here in
Yes.
Colombia. Are you coming to our meeting?
No, I won't be able to. I actually need to drop Jaime a note. A colleague of mine is able to make it, and so I need to connect them and see if it's something that when Jaime looks at their background and stuff, if that's the right individual for what he's looking for.
Oh, I see. It's a shame you can't come here.
Yeah, I wish that I could. It's conflicted with some family vacation overlap that we had already planned.
Yeah, so let me know. You already have my email.
Yes.
So I could show you some places here in Bogota.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you to you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye. Thank you.